Welcome back, everybody, to the High Tech Podcast. You're listening to me, Josh Swartz, and I am joined by the wonderful Will Illingworth, also known as DJ
Ill Will.
Ill Will? Was that? Darn it! I was trying to remember your nickname from one of the last episodes.
I wasn't gonna let you try and set it up either. I was just nope.
I was trying to remember. See, we're trying to bring continuity between episodes, guys. We did so well. We were nailing it.
Yeah, we are definitely
great at it. So we're back for another week. We remembered to be here again, and hopefully you did as well. Or we're talking to ourselves. We'll figure that out later.
I'm pretty sure Josh just sets Notion reminders, and that's why he shows up.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wouldn't remember if it wasn't for my Notion reminders. I wouldn't remember anything in my life without my Notion reminders, except for the bathroom. I remember to go there. So anyway, let's transition to a more important topic like educational technology and the things we like to talk about, not my bathroom habits. So kicking off tonight with a question before we get into all of our other fun conversations and apps. Will, what do you say to people when tech fails? Hit me with it.
I've never said anything to anyone when tech fails because tech never fails. Right?
It works perfectly.
That's it. So, no, actually, ironically, I wasn't thinking of this in prep, and I genuinely just remembered this on the spot. I have said this so many times to so many people. To me, technology is 50% science and 50% voodoo. And that, to me, captures my attitude towards tech failures, right? Like when people come to me like, oh my gosh, Will, we put all of this work into it. What? Well, yep, 50% science and the other 50% happened to you. Like I have nothing to account for the fact that voodoo, glitches, user error, user interface experience stuff, it's just, that's real.
I'm glad we started with this question because I like that line. I want
50% science, 50% voodoo. That's a t-shirt. That's going to be a high-tech t-shirt someday.
That is a high-tech t-shirt now. Our new catchphase related to voodoo. You Google high-tech voodoo and it comes up immediately. Yeah, I mean, I don't have I posed this question, right? And we planned so far ahead, people. We really did. We did a great job. Will and I came up with this question literally right before recording this podcast. So
about 2 hours ago.
Yeah, I mean, when we were both like, "Hey, we're recording an episode soon, aren't we?" We never came up with what we're going to talk about in the beginning. Here's the question. Anyway, I posed this question. I don't have a fun catchphrase or anything like that. Or a pithy line that I give to people. Anything like that. I think what encapsulates my perspective with people when tech fails is just breathe, take a deep breath.
That's good.
Relax. We'll get it figured out. In my context, I deal both with faculty and students in tech components. And I think that's my feedback every time is let's take a breath. And I make that comment knowing that I don't do that all the time when my own tech fails, or you're in the middle of an emergency, or you're trying to run a training or a class online and you do something dumb in Zoom, or you move something around, or that was not a comment towards you. I just thought about that.
or you're running a conference and you're starting it and you also end it on people 5 minutes.
Or you're Will running okay, we got to share this. Come on. If we're going to do a podcast, we have to share this. Guys, so there is we referenced them in one of our earlier episodes, conference kind of group here in Lancaster where we're from called Lancaster Learns. Will is on the team that helps run that, and he was opening the webinar, right? We got slides running with announcements. He's welcoming everybody. He's gotten the host, the main speaker in, and he goes to get one of his devices to leave the webinar, and he accidentally shuts down the webinar for all 95 people involved in the conference.
I'm pretty sure I was ending the sentence, and now to get to our keynote, I'm pretty sure that's what I was saying as I ended the webinar and kicked 95 people out of it.
So remember that when you have problems, it happens to Will too. And also to me. I've done dumb things like that too. So don't feel alone, Will.
We're the pros.
Yeah, we're supposed to be the pros, and I've definitely messed that up. But yeah, I think like just take a deep breath. Like it'll be okay. We're gonna figure it out. I think one of my encouragement that I try to give to faculty, and I don't always do this perfectly, but like I often see people react when tech fails, like like the tech is broken, like it's dead to me now. And I think one of the things we just have to accept, to your like voodoo comment, is technology is just not going to work all the time. It's unrealistic to expect that it's going to be. It just doesn't. There's glitches. Even the biggest companies like Amazon, their stuff doesn't work all the time. Yep. So we just got to anticipate it and kind of roll with it. I
experienced the first Google outage of my memory during COVID, right? Google went down in the last 6 months, and that's not something I'd ever experienced before. I couldn't imagine a day where I could get to my Gmail or my Google Drive or any of their products, and yet that had happened. Josh, that's such a great reminder, though, because that's the issue. When tech fails, what can we do? How can we react? Take a breath. Because I often say to folks who are interested in my work day or my schedule, or how do you design? Like, what does it look like to be you? I tell them there's almost nothing that's an emergency for my work, right? If your canvas isn't broken, isn't showing, I can fix it. If your quiz has weird settings, if you pick the wrong textbook, these are things we can fix. Sometimes there's a little bit of money involved, or somebody does spend something, like it's not perfect. The only thing I'd ever consider to be an emergency is like, I'm trying to give the exam right now to a class of 30 students in front of me, and I can't, right? That's an emergency. Maybe I want to be responsive. Yes. But everything else, we can fix it. We can get there. It's not the end of the world.
But even at the end of the day, to your point, like, that quiz not working, like really just take a breath and ask, like, okay, if you don't get this functioning today or something doesn't work, is it really the end of your course? Like, and I think like that's just the perspective we have to have. And I know in the midst of it, it's hard. I know, like, I'm not underplaying the stress that faculty have to deal with or teachers have to deal with in trying to do this stuff. But I also think like both students and us could just take a moment to breathe too. Like it's going to work out. We'll get it figured out. It's not the end of the world. And give that technology a second chance, maybe a third if it breaks again. Because it's not going to work all the time.
Just wait for an update.
Wait for an update. Like it's not I think it's just not the end of the world, and we have to keep that in mind. Like we'll get it figured out.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, that's just the quick pontifications that we're wrestling with as we maybe have had some tough moments in the last weeks, and like my example with tech, like things just break. Now, the real conversation, the meat of today's episode, focuses on broadly EdTech integrations, educational technology. How do we choose what to put into our classes, what to use for a learning situation, and why? What processes can we go through to help us get there? Because a lot of folks, like, frankly, it's kind of like you flip open the catalog and point, like, what do we see? All right, let's try that. Or who landed in my email inbox most recently, or what's my colleague using? That's probably the number one way I think folks find new technology.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
what's my colleague using?
Yeah, what did somebody do with this? Yeah.
I want to offer up 3 integration frameworks today. I'm not going to focus on all 3. I'm going to offer you 3, and then we'll kind of zoom in on one to kind of guide the conversation. So there's 3 frameworks that I've circled around in my work. The first is TPACK. TPACK stands for Technological, Pedagogical, and Content Knowledge. Now, if you search this, you're going to find a Venn diagram. And the idea of that Venn diagram is that in the middle of technology, pedagogy, and content knowledge is where you want to aim for, right? So we're going to need a little bit of technology. Josh just said it in past episodes. Technology started with tablets, the printing press, paper, right? Like, we are assuming some kind of technology. Then the pedagogy. Why am I trying to get them to learn something? Am I aware of their learning? Am I aware of what the content is? Am I aware of their learning goals? And then the content knowledge, like, what exactly do they need to learn? It's Algebra 1. What element of polynomials are we focusing on today, right? So at the center of that Venn diagram of experiences, technology, pedagogy, content, knowledge, how do we choose something that meets all of those needs? Another one is SAMR. This is very popular. It's gone around the Twitter educational sphere quite a few times, and I've seen everything from infographics to logos to icons to etc. But SAMR, SAMR, stands for substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. I'm not going to dig too deeply into this, right? I'm trying to give surface level, but each of those is a different way. Substitution, augmentation, modification, redefinition is a different way to look at a learning activity that you might already be doing face-to-face, or a learning experience or a learning goal, and consider how you might do that with technology. So, right, a substitution would be a one-for-one. If I use a physical whiteboard in the class, I will use a digital whiteboard with my students. Easy. But if there's ways that we can modify that or get them involved in the whiteboarding, or that can have text and handwritten things, that suddenly starts to get that augmentation, modification, redefinition space. So we're changing the whole experience. Substitution is just one for one. How do I take analog and go digital? Now, last but not least is simply RAT. Okay, this is my favorite. RAT. What better of an acronym to help folks think about educational technology? Because educational technology is dense. There's too many options. There's too much marketing. There's too much money.
What?
That's never been your problem, right, Josh? It's easy for you.
There's only like 5 options in EdTech.
Yeah, 5 options for like a handwriting app.
Yeah, that's all you need.
Yeah. I like RAT because it has the ideas behind TPACK and behind SAMR, but it's simple, okay? R is replication, A is amplification, T is transformation. So replication pretty much is just like SAMR's substitution, right? What am I doing physically? What am I doing in an analog context? How do I make it digital? I'm trying to replicate the experience in a digital context. Amplification then is like, all right, I've got the whiteboards again, right? But I want the students to be able to write on it too. I don't just want me to be the only person writing on the whiteboard. Okay, there's an amplification. The transformation might be, well, I don't even just want the students to be able to write on it, or me just to be able to write on it. I want it to be a part of my entire presentation experience. So I'm going to have my slides there. I'm going to let them be able to see my handwriting while they can see the slides. I want them to have transcriptions. I want them to see each other. I want there to be pictures. Like suddenly we can only use Miro to meet that learning goal. So this was like a Will brain dump. Forgive me. But when we come back to RAT, I think that is so helpful for you. Start with one of those 3 layers and say, what's the hardest thing I'm willing to take on at the moment? Can I think about transforming my entire learning experience to meet something? No, I just need to replicate it. And that's really where Josh and I are involved in the process, right? You can reach out to us and say, hey, Will, I'm trying to do whiteboarding. What can I do digitally? I can come to Josh and say, Josh, I need to write Post-it notes and then put them out on a board in random and then have the students sort them. Josh says,
I throw out a Miro or a nice few options for him.
Right. Yeah. This is all we do. We're the ones taking from you that input of, I've got something I'm trying to accomplish, and then we need to be able to process it at different levels to give you something back. And caveat, cloud over all this, it's got to meet the learning goals. We're not just going to go for the most expensive tool, the coolest tool, or the tool that hits all those bells and whistles. And oftentimes, we just got to replicate the experience first. We can get the physical replication into a digital context. We can amplify it, or we can transform it at a later time. But these are the kinds of things that help us, I think, process the ed tech stuff. And Josh, I know has a number of like tools that he's built into his space to help with that. You've got a form for like Canvas, LTIs.
Yeah, I mean, like, that gets into like our process of evaluating technology as like just adopting a tool. as a concept, which goes a little bit, it's a little bit of a different, I think, strain, and we'll even talk more in detail later about that in some future episodes. But what I think I find helpful about these models is that they just focus the conversation around technology about what you want to try to do. Because what I often find, right, is in EdTech or in education, what is not happening a lot is some of this. Like, it's what's really happening is like either emergency reaction or like they, like what we saw over this past spring and basically this past year related to COVID. It's like, I need to do this. I need something. Like, I just need anything I can do, which is why we've talked about whiteboards. We've talked about collaborative documents and stuff like that. But then a lot of what I see is like, I saw this cool tool, or somebody sent something to me about this tool related to quizzes that I can do, so I don't have to build my own questions. Or like, like there's a lot of like options that are given without maybe careful thought about how we're going to use the tool. Or it's the cool thing of that day and age. Like, if I had $1 for every time somebody mentions Kahoot, you know what I mean? Like, I would be so rich. Or every time somebody's like, I saw somebody use Flipgrid, let's do it. Like, with those options.
I hate, but the capital HATE, hate Kahoot's music. Like, when I hear that music, I get a little triggered.
I thought you were just gonna like generally say you hate Kahoot. I was like, man, that is a statement. That is.
I it's the most Jeopardy style elevator music you possibly could have.
But the point here that I think I'm trying to make is that, like, what is nice about these models in general, just kind of all three of them have their own different, quite frankly, they may all think they're super special, but they all have their own ways of just restating the same thing.
Right.
Like, with the exception of the TPACK model, I think has a little bit of a different component to it when it's bringing in those three elements together. But SAMR and RAT are really saying the same thing. It's just RAT saying it in 3 options and SAMR saying it in 4 and acting much more complicated.
And I've learned from the whiteboarding episode, Josh, like, we can't have 7 things to throw at folks. Yeah. So I kept it lit because there's more.
Oh, no,
there are others out there.
Well, it wouldn't be education if we didn't come up with 5,000 ways of stating that we're doing these evaluation processes or theories.
Alphabet soup, man. Alphabet soup.
But either way, the point here is intentionally asking, what are you trying to do, and finding the solution for it. Like, how far do you want to go? I like your comment about, like, how far do you want to go and what you're trying to do here. What space are you in? Because I think what it comes down to with adopting technology, evaluating how to use and integrating it, is really realizing that, like, it's not about, I feel like people think they're like Pokemon, like they need to evolve in teaching. Like, so you start off replacing, right? Like, you only replace things, and then you finally reach this golden era, right? You're a Charizard, okay, and you have transformed your course with technology, as if like this is an evolution process. And there's a certain element to it, but really it's not about that. It's about understanding, what are you trying to do and what tools are available for you to do that. So, like, it's fine to do replacement. Like, you need to do that in some places. That's because what you're trying to replace works well. You're trying to place there. Maybe you're not teaching fully online. You're just teaching. You're using your LMS, or you're using digital space. You're bringing stuff in. It's okay to do some kind of like amplification concept, where you're taking it. And then it is good, I think, to think about, as you're using technology, okay, I've been using it this way. Is there some way in my environment maybe I could try to do something that actually transforms an activity in a better way? Right, to like your comment about the way you could use Miro, or I'm even thinking we're going to be talking about like blogging or something like that. That's a tool that gives you availability to do something you couldn't do in class. And that's have students produce actual art, an artifact that goes beyond them into the digital space. And that transforms. But all of these have their value, and all of them should be used. It's not like you're going to eventually get to the point where you're just transforming your entire course and not doing any of those other options.
Well, and really what I've just learned from this episode is that in the truest sense, we're all Charizards inside. And we just need to allow the Charizard in us to come out. So we have just perfectly dated ourselves and spoken to a niche community. But
yeah, I use the very.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy you brought Pokemon into the podcast, because I was gonna eventually. No, what I love about what you point there, Josh, about like replication, amplification, transformation, as you work through that, and you gave some examples. I also find that a lot of faculty come to me looking either for an immediate replication. I need to go one-to-one. I'm doing something analog. I want to go digital. Or they come to me and say, moonshot. I want to land on the moon, right? I need to build. I want to drive a fire truck after I build it and teach the kids to drive it too. Like, and I'm like, oh, depending on the person, we have to find the right sweet spot. We really need to sit in amplification sometimes. Like, I need to get some folks up from replication. I need to get some people to back down off of transformation, because you have to be able to take on a goal, of course, first and foremost, that meets the current learning objectives that we're working with, right? And if we get outside of that, you can really lose yourself in the weeds. But it can also help to hem us in, because we can oftentimes take on too much. And there's some real humanity level issues there where we need to find some peace in ourselves. Take a breath, right? Josh's earlier encouragement. Take a breath and say, let's transform the course over the next 3 semesters. Or when we get a grant to help pay for the changes, or, whatever the situation is. Like, transformation is absolutely great, but it is not easy, and it is not quick. And it is not cheap.
I think the point in all of this, though, is that, like, to your point, what I often see is people coming with these certain perspectives of what they want to do. And what you're saying is totally realistic. I see mostly those 2 groups, not a middle group very often, which is the 2 groups to your point. I either want to replicate exactly what I'm doing, or somebody told me this awesome tool and I just want to use it because I'll feel, I think there's a desire in us to feel like a cooler teacher. And so we feel like the technology is just going to automatically make it that way.
Can I redesign my course that launches next week?
I want to use this tool, or they want to include every tool in the toolbox, which that's a different conversation, and we'll talk about that different time. But to the point of, like, these processes or these models are all really asking you to say, take a step back. What is your actual goal? Coming back to the learning goals. What are you trying to achieve? What do students need to know? And then, is this tool going to help you replicate something? Is it going to enhance the activity, or the way that you get to that goal? Is it going to transform the way, like, you can get to that in a richer format, or a richer end result than you could have without that tool? If you're asking those questions and the answer to all of those is no, and it's just that, like, the tool is cool, then that technology is not for what you're doing. Like, it needs to be put somewhere else, and you come back to it in a different course or a different situation.
Hold on to it, because it could be worth it.
It could, you hold on to that stuff. Like, we like technology. I like using technology. I still don't think technology is the end of itself. I think it is a tool for us to leverage, to enhance what we're doing. And that looks like different things in different places, but we have to carefully ask those questions. And that's when you're going to get rich technological experiences in courses, is when you're carefully asking those questions and then carefully integrating it into the content and the goals that you're bringing in, not just kind of flippantly pulling it in.
All right. So you had said something earlier that triggered a thought, and I want to make sure we don't lose that. You were saying, in the sense that when we do certain kinds of activities in certain transformations, we might make the students do kind of learning that's more authentic, or create something, like you said, a blog that could result in better work. I want to turn to that, Josh, because I think we've got a really great tool.
Oh, what a transition.
That could help us get to that, right? That could cultivate those same kinds of transformations for our listeners. So, what is our app of the day?
Yes. So we chose to talk about a good old app. a nice one called WordPress. Okay. So if you don't know what WordPress is, it is I call it a blogging tool. It's really kind of like a website tool, but that you can create a site on, but it's mainly intended for a lot of people that use it in blogging. But you can do it in other places too. But it's a great tool for students to use to basically create blogs or kind of digital content. You can release blog posts through there. They can add video content. It's basically like building a very basic website in there that they can add they make it their own. They can add images, design it, stuff like that. Sky's kind of the limit with the tool. Like you can go very basic and they help students. They give guidance to students. They don't expect a lot out of students, where like they can easily just kind of like interchange an image and type up a blog, and they don't have to get crazy. But then it's also a really nice tool for those students who really like to dive into that type of stuff, and they can really move the page around, change its format, mess with things. I think it kind of gives both groups of people options when they're creating it.
Yeah, I've heard that. I don't have a statistic or a reference at the moment. It's come up in different conversations, different groups, where people said like a lot of the internet is on WordPress based sites, right?
Yeah,
like WordPress is very easy to use. It's one of the earlier products in that space, and it's lasted. Like you've got Weebly, you've got Wix, you've got actual blogging tools like Tumblr. But WordPress splits the difference and will give you some of that custom approach if you want to get custom. But otherwise, it's all plug and play. Like you pick a template, you add in your own images if you want to, you move some menu items around, you start posting blogs. Like it's really as simple as it possibly can be for somebody to get a, me.wordpress.com website and start rolling tomorrow with some authentic content for people to be reading.
Oh, and here's what I love about WordPress. So like the WordPress is a tool that the institution I work at, I actually got the chance to evaluate it and place it in as an actual approved tool in our kind of online course repertoire. Because we have a blogging activity that we have in our catalog that ends up in a good bit of courses. And what I love about WordPress, because I live in this space where I'm both kind of helping the technology side, and then also I have to help and support in certain areas as well, because it's sometimes basically a part of our job. The WordPress does a great job of, when you get in, having like a site setup checklist for people that are in there. And I love this type of stuff because it's a great user experience, because it literally just walks them through the process of setting up their site. Because where I find students often get hung up on an activity like blogging is a lot of them aren't used to blogging. Some of them do, but most of them don't. Or they did, and they did it through their social media, and it's a different experience. So they're not used to setting up a site. And so like some of the tools don't do a great job of navigating this. WordPress does a great job of kind of giving a site setup. They have like a quick setup guide that we reference in our resources to students. We really didn't have to create any resources for this on our side or really give a lot of guidance. It was basically we link to stuff WordPress already manages and takes care of, and let the students do their thing. We found that for the most part it works well, that it holds up, and it's a great tool. And I love the blogging activity because it is speaking to our technology integration conversation. A blogging activity, I think, is a good can fall in enhancement, but I even think kind of a transformative tech activity, because it's something you don't do in other places. This allows them to both reflect and write on whatever you want them to write on. A journal. Our activity is kind of like a journal blogging type of thing. They write weekly, but they're putting out an actual product, an artifact that they can share beyond their course. They can get feedback on it from peers. They can use it in other places. They can use it as even like a portfolio type of item to show what they've done. I've seen students who've done these types of activities and they end up continuing a blog afterwards, which is really cool. And so that's just kind of like, it's something that's different, that without this type of medium of a blog, you don't do something like this.
And it's something I had to do as a student in grad school. And I didn't keep up the blog like you're saying, for years and years and whatever, but I did. What I found very interesting from my experience in grad school was that I did all the assignments, and I was always just doing so much work to synthesize articles and bring journal content together, and da 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 da. that I had leftover content, and I would just start writing other blogs, right? So I was in the class still, but I wrote all the required blogs, and then I was writing extras because I felt like I had content, I had an audience. My class members were all reading and interested, and it was really a fun activity there to work on it. But I've kept up my WordPress site since then to have kind of a professional portfolio, keep my information up to date and keep what I'm working on there and reference publications and articles and conferences, stuff like that. So it's a really practical tool. It does hit a lot of educational needs, but I think it's very important for giving the students real world skills. Like they're going to have the opportunity to maybe run a website or interact with a website in their future. Yeah. And it could be a really good practice for them.
Because to your point, you're mentioning things like, picture this, like and I'm not saying don't have them write formal papers. Let's be very clear about that. But like you had to do some stuff in that blog assignment that you wouldn't do in a normal paper writing, which is like, yeah, you're pulling resources together, you're writing stuff, but in a blog, but you're pulling together some image content. Maybe if they add that in as a requirement, you're releasing something not just as a paper that your instructor sees, but as a visual artifact. And you have to think about that a little bit differently. So it requires them to think through communication skills differently. And I think that's what I really like about this type of concept. And there's a lot of tools that can do it. I think the reason we picked WordPress is just, in my opinion, it's one of the bigger sites. It's when I'm looking at tools like this, I'm always trying to evaluate, like, one, how long are they going to be around? Am I going to need to update this next year because it crashed and is no longer a thing? WordPress, that's not happening. If WordPress crashes, there's a lot of the internet crashing, so WordPress is around. And I'm also evaluating, like, how easy, like, is this going to become an impediment for the students? And WordPress, I think, does a good job of kind of navigating them through the process of creating a site and even a blog, because they are not necessarily just a blogging tool, but I've found they've really leaned in their guidance into like this blogging component because they're finding, I think, a lot of people using their stuff for this type of use. So I think,
and they have a big education block, right? Like Weebly, Wix, some of the other website development sites out there that will let you build a website. The students could build their blogs in that space are almost all business first. And WordPress doesn't necessarily assume that. It's capable for business purposes, but I like that WordPress has an educator community in and around it. And if you have questions, you can kind of Google around a little bit. And my institution has a site-wide license with it, and we use a third-party hoster that's educational focused. So we even have access to that third-party community that provides information. Well, yeah, sure.
Speaking of plans, though, great transition. We do not, because like high tech, we like in our space too, cheap. So WordPress does have free models, so we use it completely for free. And they don't have necessarily limitations on like how many blogs people can post, like stuff like that. I'm always looking out when I have free tools that they're not like, you can only post 2 blog posts and then you have to pay us $1 billion. That's
you have to talk somebody through the whole process. Like, all right, so you post 2 blog posts and then you put them to hide, and then you can post 3 more.
Them. Yeah. And then
no, none of that.
So they do a good job of that. They do a little bit of a pushing of their paid plans, but it's very easy to push through into free without confusion. And even their paid plans are not bad. I mean, like, their personal plans like $4 a month, and it goes up to like, they have like premium business and like a higher level than that, but the free is absolutely more than enough for a student who's doing a blog assignment, or even going beyond their assignment. So that's why I also really like WordPress. I just think it fits well into that space. So I apologize for whatever you just had to hear before this moment. I don't know what it is, because we're going to do editing, Will. But I know that we're learning. So that's that.
Episode by episode, step by step.
Episode by episode. Okay, so thank you for joining us tonight, guys, for another great episode. Conversations, looking at some apps. We're really enjoying this podcast and hanging out with you guys. We hope you guys are as well.
And we'll be able to move forwards with more conversations on these apps and stuff like that. We just want to make sure each of these points always comes back to the fact that we want to harness technology in the classroom at a physical or digital level. And that really sticks out to us because we're not trying to make something new every time. We're not trying to always find the shiniest thing. We just want to find what works and what works today. We'll see what happens next time. Thank you again for listening to us. This is Josh and Will. We'll see you in the next episode.
See ya.